Last part of this tutorial, I want to use transparency maps or a transparency map to give an aged, war-torn look to this flag. I want to give it some tears, maybe some holes in it. So to see the texture map that we have on here, I'm going to select the flag, right mouse click in my work area, and say Graph Materials on Selected Objects. From here, you can see the complexity of the shading network that we had. And we've already pulled this apart before to see all the different elements. But I want to simplify things a little bit, and I want to be able to look at my transparency map in and of itself. And there are a few switches that we can use to turn things off, but at this point it's probably a lot easier to do it the way that I did before, which is to just take the same blend material that I used for the dirt map and apply that temporarily to the flag, and I'll just do an IPR render on that. So now I can just show the input and output connections of this new blend, and you can see that it's obviously very simple and very easy. Once I get the transparency map looking the way that I like as a color map, I'll just reapply it as a transparency map to my original shading network. So I've done a little bit of experimentation with procedural textures, and frankly, I don't think any of them is necessarily great. You may be better off using a file texture to map the transparency, something that you can paint or photograph yourself. But I want to show some of these procedural methods. So I've decided to use a marble texture as my transparency map. So I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the blend and map that to the color attribute, and I'll do an IPR render here so that we can see how it maps on. So the marble map is it consists of a vein color, which is this sort of maroon, and then a filler color, which is white, and then it has some diffusion here to give us this kind of smoky look on the marble. And in and of itself, it needs some adjustment before it can actually look like marble, but we want to make it look like holes. So looking at my blend texture or my blend material here, the transparency is an attribute that is controlled by a slider that goes from black or 0 to white or 1. And you know that white or 1 means full transparency, and black means no transparency or complete opacity. So as long as I'm mapping that, I want my vein color here to be black. And I don't want any of this diffusion here, because that's going to give me partial transparency. Wherever it's grayscale, it's going to give me 50% or 60% transparent. I want it either to be transparent, or fully black, or opaque, which is fully white. So I'm going to take the diffusion down to 0, and this is going to give us this kind of looks like drippy paint on here. We can now play with the vein width, and what I've done actually in the past fairly successfully is changed, offset the filler color, or inverted the filler color and the vein color. And then when you play around with the vein width, all of this white stuff here is going to drop out. There's another aspect of this marble map that that we really need to concern ourselves with. When I first created it, you want to notice that this came from my 3D textures section, which is a little different than all the other ones that we've taken out of the 2D section. What this is a volume of texture. And the placement here, the placement node, is actually a 3D placement node that's part of my scene. So when I select this, I can see that the placement node is it's a cube that has a little face on it. And what I see in this little icon swatch actually appears on this face, and then it gets repeated around several times on this surface. So if I want to change the coverage, instead of changing the numeric values like I did in the 2D texture, all I really need to do is scale this up. Okay, so you can scale it, you can manipulate it just like an object in your scene. So I'm going to scale this up here and scale it down on one axis. And by manipulating the scale of this and then changing things like the ratio, the ripples, if I go with, say, 0.2 or 0.3 ripples, you can see I even it out. This is going to have ripples in the X, Y, and Z. So I can really, make some substantial changes here. So let's go to 0.8 here and scale this up a little bit more. And really, I'm just playing here. I really have no real intent other than to make it look good. And I'm just looking at this white as being some kind of transparency or tear. So I'll just move it, and as I move it, even as I translate this thing from one side to the next, it starts to it changes the position of the whole thing. So let's just move this over here, and I can take my vein width and decrease it a little bit, and then I can take my ripples, move them like that maybe. Okay, so I'm going to leave this just like this. I've got two sort of horizontal stripes in here that have some tears in them. So once I've got that established the way that I like it, I'll find my original blend material here. I'm going to take the marble map and I'm going to apply that to the transparency. I'll take the blend material and apply that to my flag, and you can see that this is the kind of tear that I've got in there. And one thing that I want to point out is that the transparent areas are not completely black. They're not completely transparent, and that's the specular highlight that we were talking about before. I'm seeing a little bit of an illuminated sheen on there, which is blocking my transparency. So what we want to do about this, let's just take a look at the, let's get rid of the blend, this second blend here, and just look at the inputs of this. Well, let's take a look at our marble here. So what we really want to do is have our specular highlight, which is also a black and white scale. We want that to follow the same pattern as the marble, but we want it to be inverted. So in other words, wherever the marble was white, it's transparent. But if we have white as the specular, that's going to give us a complete blown out highlight. We want black in the marble map where we want the specular to be, and we want some sort of gray to follow, where the opacity is. So if I can invert this marble map and then reapply it as a specular map, that'll accomplish what it is that I'm trying to do. In my visor here, under Utilities, I have a reverse node. You can just type in the name here, and it'll find what you're looking for. And the reverse node will just invert properties. So when I drag the marble map on there and make that the input, what the reverse node does is flip the values. I can take that reverse and map that to the specular color, and that will accomplish almost everything that I want. It's completely erased the specular value here, but it has maximized, or has turned the specular highlight all the way up to 1 in the rest of the flag, giving me a real shiny flag. So I like the black part, I don't like the white part. So the other thing that I can do then with this reverse node is I can clamp the values down. So let's just delete that connection there, and I have another node in here called a clamp node. Now what the clamp node does is it will take three inputs. Theoretically they're RGB, but they can really be any three numbers. And then it will clamp that 0 to 1 range to a range that I define here by my minimum and maximum range. So I'm going to take the reverse node and drop it into the clamp. And I know that my reverse node goes from 0 to 1. I don't want that to go from 0 to 1. I want the maximum specular value to be something like 0.5. So on my max here, I'll go 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. And then I'll drop that down onto the specular color. And that's going to accomplish what it is that I'm looking for. Let's just do a quick render here and maximize the render, and you can see that now I have that war-torn look. My specular is not too overblown. I still have all my wrinkles and everything's following, the way that it should. So from here, then I can take this marble material and start playing around with it. I know that because I'm remapping the same marble with the same placement node through both the transparency and specular channels, whatever I do here, those channels are going to continue to line up. So let's take this marble here, and if I take my vein width and change it, let's do a So I'll take my vein width and increase. And I can get more war tearing. Maybe I've got the remnant. Maybe I've got the remnant of a flag that I've just dug up out of some archaeological dig. So let's try moving this up a little bit, maybe up a little bit more, and we can scale it. We can get a bigger piece. And so there's a lot of different things that we can do. Once we get the concept correct, then we can we can adjust this however we want. So maybe that's a little bit better. So as I said, if I were doing this for a client, I would probably use a photo texture or something like that to get this look. But I did want to show you how you could do it procedurally. And this reverse and clamp node are fairly important elements of this.